Hey, I'm Stephanie, and I'm wondering if you have ever been stereotyped for what you do. I certainly have, and I'm going to tell you a story about when my ex-mother-in-law stereotyped me, and it was actually the first time that I met her that she completely insulted me to my face. So, I'll tell you the story. Let's get ready together. Alright, so I wanted to tell you about the time when I first met my ex-mother-in-law, and the first thing that she said to me, well, among the first things that she said to me was an insult, which I actually learned was kind of her way, but she was really sneaky about it, and so I always would leave situations like that thinking, like, did she just insult me? I think that she did, and this is not on. I'm gonna have to turn my flat iron on. Let this baby heat up. Well, I'll tell you about it while I'm waiting. I was in my second or third year as a hairstylist and had just moved in with who was then my boyfriend, and I did marry him eventually, but we were only dating at the time, and now we're divorced, which is good. It's a congratulations situation. So I just moved in with him in his duplex, and his mom came over to visit, and she let herself in with a key, which was my first red flag. I should have run away screaming. And she knew already that I was a hairstylist, because I was a hairstylist and makeup artist at a local salon at the time. And so I don't know if she was nervous, and this is all that she could think of to talk about, but she nervously started telling me that she, every hairstylist that she's ever had just never gives her what she wants. And she's like, none of them can give me what I want, and they never do what I want them to do. And my haircut's not that hard, but no matter what, no matter how much money I pay, they never do what I want them to do. And I realized very, very quickly that I was being lumped into the they and the them in that situation. And all I could do was kind of smile and nod. And I knew that she used to come to the salon that I worked at, which was actually a very high-end, it still is, very high-end salon out in the neighborhood where she lived. And so she proceeded to tell me about how, since they could never give her what she wanted, she had resorted to cutting her own hair, because obviously she's the only one who could do it right. But sort of backhandedly, in so many words, just knocked my career choice and made it seem like none of us were good at what we do. And I know some of the hairstylists that used to cut her hair, and they're excellent at what they do. So it was just this really weird, thorn in my side. And it was actually the first of many times that that's happened to me, but not always from the same person. And ironically, I did end up cutting her hair, and I was the only one that could touch her hair for a long time. It took years to build that trust with her, though. So it's something that showed up for me over and over again over the course of my career as a hairstylist, is that I would find myself in social situations and people would ask me what I do, and I'd say I'm a hairstylist, and they'd be like, oh, with exactly that tone in their voice. And after you've been received in that way enough times, and greeted with sort of a disinterest, it sort of makes you less willing to share that information. And also, when you start noticing how you're being received in that way, and it's a little bit negative, you start to think that, oh, my job isn't something that people find interesting, or it's not one that people take seriously. And that's one of the ones that I realized the most over the course of my 13-year career as a hairstylist. It wasn't until I went off and started my own business and started saying I had my own hair and makeup business that people started to take me a little bit more seriously, but it was marginal, to be honest. And it made me think about how are stereotypes, because I was definitely being typecast or, grouped into this lump of people and all of the assumptions that people have about hairstylists, how they can start to define us from the outside in. And what I mean by that is that, other people have ideas about what you are when you belong to a group of people, right? And what ends up happening is when you get treated that same way over and over and over again, you start to believe what it is that they think about you. And I think it's pretty normal for us to find some of our identity and our worth from outside validation or outside information. Like when we're looking at how the world treats us, we use that as evidence of who we are and what we're worth. And when you're told over and over again, or treated in a way where you're less than, or what you do doesn't matter as much, or it's not interesting, it's harder to burn your own torch for it after a while. And it made me realize how I kind of got lost in that and let that become my reality for a really long time. I've always been an entrepreneurial spirit, and I knew, from a young age that I wanted to be a business owner. And when I first started working at the salon, I knew that I only wanted to be there for a few years. And I was there for 11 and a half. That's a long time. And I somehow, over the course of that time, kind of forgot that I had that dream. I kind of buried it, I stuffed it. I started to believe some of the things that people said and some of the things that people traditionally thought about people in my career. I think there was at that time, I think people are becoming more accepting now, but there was at that time this attitude of like, oh, you're just a hairstylist. And there was this kind of thought around it where people who went into doing hair and makeup weren't good at school, and that's why they did it. And I was actually great at school. I did it because I wanted to do something that I loved. And it was sort of a rebellion against my dad. Maybe that's a little bit more traditional too. And after a while, I kind of forgot about those entrepreneurial dreams because I started to believe this, I'm just a hairstylist. And when you've done the same thing for a really long time, it can become really easy to put a lot of stock into that thing and think that you actually might not be good at anything else. And it happens in all sorts of ways. I coach women who are mothers and their children grow up and leave the nest, so to speak, and then they're kind of stuck in this place of like, oh my gosh, I was a mom for so many years, and you're always a mom, right? But after a while, your kids don't need you in the same way anymore, and so that part of your identity is gone, but you feel a little lost without it. Like, what else am I good at? And who am I without this thing? And in the same way, that's what happened to me with my hair career and makeup career, in that I did it for so long and I spent so much time and energy on it that I wasn't really sure like what else was out there or what else I could be capable of. And I ended up having to go through this time in my life where I had to prove to myself that I was so much more than that. And it makes me think of this woman that I met really early in my career, and she's amazing. She's probably only famous in the hair world, but her name is Vivian McKinder. And she is like, I don't know if she'd like me saying this, but I'm gonna call her the fairy godmother of hairstyling. She's been around forever and she's just absolutely lovely. And I got to meet her while I was still in school at the Beta Institute, and I assisted her with a project that she was doing then. And she had this, among other products, she had this t-shirt line, and the t-shirt said, on them in, you know, a bunch of rows of words. They said, I'm not just a hairstylist. And then it said like 20 or 30 other things, like I'm a therapist, I'm a coach, I'm a, you know, great listener, I'm a mom, I'm a, like a million different things. And I didn't understand it at the time because I was still in school and I hadn't experienced life in that career yet, and I was super young. But it was so interesting. It's interesting to look back on it now, and I've looked back on it a couple of times throughout my career where I'm like, oh, this woman had been doing hair for over 30 years, and I totally get it now. I get why it's important to know that you are more than what you do, and that you are more than the labels that someone else gave to you. You're more than the labels you've given to yourself, and you're more than any specific role can ever define you as in your life. And I think it's easy to forget that because we lose ourselves in our roles and we find worth in our roles and in our jobs and our careers. And underneath all of that, you are wonderful and unique, and you're changing, and you're not who you were when you started. And I think it's important to honor that and to take away words like just, like I'm just this or I'm only that, and really claim what it is that you want out of that role. And don't reduce yourself to being only that. And so that's my story. Went off on a little tangent there, but that was my story about my ex-mother-in-law. Glad she's my ex-mother-in-law. And I would love to hear if you have experienced this in your own life. Have you been reduced to any certain roles or stereotypes or labels, and have you done it to yourself, or has someone else done that to you from the outside in? So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.